Before we start, do this for me. Tell me where you are watching from and how much time you have right now. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the full hour. Drop your city and the nearest river or harbor in the comments. We are going to match bell counts to ferry runs, and your shore might be in the ledger. Open the parish burial register for the waterfront chapel. 9 burials in 2 weeks, all marked pauper, all marked box pine, no dressing. Plot numbers run in order along the mainland fence. Fees remitted. The handwriting is steady, the ink the same blue-black on every line. Now lay the sexton's bell book beside it. The sexton writes in pencil because he is paid by the pull. He notes weather, mist, east wind, drizzle, and he notes strokes. On the same days covered by the register, he records 11 death tolls, not 9. He underlines 2 mornings with a small dot after the number. That dot is his private sign for no procession. Bells without a line of mourners on the path. Walk 2 blocks to the ferry company office. Ask for the night book, the one the day clerk calls the coal and overtime sheet. The column heads are simple: date, boat, coal loaded, runs after dusk, crew hours, initials. 12 night runs in the same fortnight. 8 are marked City Ferry. 4 are marked Hospital Ferry. The Hospital Ferry line shows the boat name in a different hand, as if the captain wrote it himself. Coal-loaded is heavier on those 4 nights by a quarter ton. A short night run needs little coal. A long, slow loop to the quarantine island against tide draws more. The captain initials those lines with a quick slash and the letter C. On the payroll sheet, the same nights carry porter overtime for stretcher duty. Now pull the harbor master's movement book. Steamers detained appear there in a small box with a single word: held. He notes the ship, the flag, the reason, and the hour when the yellow flag goes up on the quarantine pole. 2 times that week he writes cholera denied, passengers examined, some detained. He does not say where the detained went. He does not need to. The yellow flag says it for him. The island is a mile of water from the pier and a paper world away from the coroner's reach. Go down to the slip and look at the hospital ferry itself. Low hull, broad stern. A lamp bracket at the bow painted over too many times. The deck shows scuff marks from iron rim wheels and dark stains that carbolic will not bleach clean. The gangway has a fresh length of rope spliced into the handrail, the kind of splice a man makes when stretcher bearers want more grip. On the dock piling there is a white crust line 3 inches above last week's tide, where lime washed back against wood. Lime travels to places where the Board of Health does not print the word dead. Open the Board of Health minutes for the month. The secretary writes, no new cases in town. Quarantine measures satisfactory. Pest house provisions approved. There is a vote for coal allotment to the island boiler, and a vote for carbolic and chloride of lime, 2 barrels. The clerk adds paid beside the supplier's name. On the same page, a short note appears in a different nib. Public alarm unfounded. City safe. The word safe is underlined twice. The minutes do not carry a line for burials on island because the island's dead house belongs to jurisdiction outside the parish and outside the sexton's pay. The bell on shore can toll for a man who never sets his name in the register. Check the undertaker's receipts. 9 numbered slips match the parish lines. 2 numbers are missing in the sequence. The stub for 1 missing slip carries only the total and the word ferry in pencil, then rubbed with a thumb to blur it. The second missing stub lists 1 coffin, plain, and 1 canvas tilt. The supplier invoice for that week includes 4 extra canvas tilts billed to island. Undertakers buy tilts when the wind and rain will soak a stretcher. They buy 4 when a ferry runs at night 4 times. Go to the pest house ledger, which the island steward keeps in a hand that never wastes a letter. 3 columns repeat across the page: detained, removed, discharged. The column death is not printed anywhere. Under detained, he writes numbers. Under removed, he writes times. Under discharged, he writes surnames when he can and nothing when he cannot. 2 lines in the fortnight read, "Removed at midnight." No destination. The steward draws a short mark in the margin to tell himself who signed the order. The same mark appears on a loose slip pinned to the back cover. Hospital ferry ordered by board physician. Coroner declined. Outside jurisdiction. Outside jurisdiction is the water itself. The door between names and numbers is a mile of tide. Stand on the mainland at the chapel fence and look out across the channel at dusk. The bell rope hangs still. The sexton's cottage window is dark. A whistle carries low on the water, not a train, but a short double from a small engine. The hospital ferry bows around the breakwater with no deck lamp showing, but the bow light hooded and the cabin lamp turned to the wall. 2 men in white sleeves stand with a stretcher under a canvas. The pole on the island shows no light, but a faint glow beads at the pest house door. On the mainland path, no mourners walk. The bell will toll in the morning because it is paid to toll for death, whether a name sits in the column or not. Now read the ice house log for the same nights. Hospital ferry, 300 pounds, loaded after 11. Ice for a butcher goes out at dawn. Ice for a pest house goes out when sun will not melt it on the tide. The porter's book at the ferry office shows ice in, stretcher out, in the same hand that wrote 4 hospital ferry runs into the overtime sheet. The porter goods entry says canvas returned torn. The foreman circles torn and writes hedge. There is only one hedge high enough to snag canvas on the route. It stands by the back path to the island burial ground. Back in the chapel, the sexton runs his finger down the margin of his bell book and adds a dot beside one more mourning. 11 tolls. 9 lines in the parish book. The ferry loaded coal 4 nights more than a city schedule demands. The harbor master hung the yellow flag and wrote, "Detained, not dead." The Board of Health said safe and bought lime and carbolic. The undertaker rubbed out a word on a stub. The pest house steward wrote removed at midnight and never wrote where. The island wind carries a salt that rusts iron fast. The hinge on the island gate shows bright metal where a key turns more often than the minutes admit. Open the quarantine station register. Heavy covers, salt-stained, pages ruled into 3 neat columns that decide a life with a single word: detained, removed, discharged. There is no printed column for died. The steward writes the ship name, the date, a tally mark under detained, and then a time under removed. If the person walks away, a surname appears under discharged with a destination like returned to steamer or to city hospital. If they do not walk away, the line ends as a number under removed, and the steward adds a tiny diagonal stroke in the margin, his private mark that the board physician signed the order. Spread the day's papers on the table. On top is the boarding surgeon's manifest from the steamer, a printed sheet with rows for cabin, steerage, sick list, and nationality. There are 5 names on the sick list, written in 3 scripts, Latin letters, Cyrillic, and a rough hand that tries to make an umlaut. The surgeon circles fever, diarrhea, and rash. He writes to island beside 3. He does not write where on the island. He does not write a bed number. The harbor master's book matches the hour, stamps held, and draws a small box with a check mark, yellow flag hoisted. The island intake cards for those 3 show a different language. Each card is a rectangle of stiff paper with blanks for name, age, origin, symptoms, and disposition. Disposition is a drop-down of the steward's hand. Detained, removed, discharged. It is never dead. On card 1, the steward writes the name phonetically, Joseph, and adds detained, cholera watch. On card 2, he writes Maria, crosses it out, and writes Mary, then detained, rash. On card 3, the name is a scrawl that looks like Hunrik, and the steward writes detained, ship fever. In the corner of all three, he pencils a letter that matches a pest house ward. A for cholera shed, C for contagion, D for dormitory. Within 2 days, Card 1 and Card 3 gain a removed time at night. Card 2 gains discharge to steamer with a translation note. Recovered, released. Walk to the pest house register, a long book with a brass clasp. The header says, Patients under observation. The left margin is a simple running number. Day 1, no. 214, man, 30s, steerage, fever. Day 2, no. 215, woman, 20s, rash. The right margin is status, improved, no change, removed. The steward writes removed for number. 214 at 11:40 p.m. draws a thin line through the row and carries no surname forward. In the supply column for that night, the nurse initials 2 extra scoops of chloride of lime and 1 canvas noted as soiled. The canvas moves somewhere when removed appears. The nurse never writes buried. She writes linen burned, bed aired, floor scrubbed. In the Board of Health Daily Order Book, a carbon copy notice slips between pages. By order of the board physician, patient number. 214 to be removed from observation to grounds northeast at the 12th hour to prevent alarm upon the morning ferry. The carbon shows the name of the doctor in faint mirror. The doctor's name never appears in the steward's register. The steward leaves the word removed to say what the order did. Now examine the translator's notebook. Quarantine hires translators by the week when ships carry mixed lists. The translator writes the family names as he hears them and tries to match them to the Ellis Island-style intake cards when they exist for that port. In the margin, he sketches accents, ski, wits, ich. He underlines the last syllable for stress. For Josef, he writes 2 options, Josef and Josef. For Henrik, he offers Henrik, Henrik, Henrik. He leaves the surname blanks empty because the steamer's clerk barely wrote them, and the island steward rarely chases them. When a body is removed at night, the translator's notebook remains the last place the vowels sit in the right order. Cross-check the tally sheets for disinfectants. In the same 2 nights when number 214 and number 219 show removed at late hours, the island storekeeper issues carbolic acid, 4 pounds, chloride of lime, 2 barrels, and rope, 1 coil. The rope is listed under dock to avoid the appearance of a graveyard requisition. The coal sheet shows extra shovels thrown on the boiler at the same hour to keep steam for the ferry. The ice log reads 300 pounds to pest house, with the porter's initials. Ice in the dark is not for drinking. It is for what the steward does not print under disposition. Read the chaplain's call book, a thin notebook from a man who sees last rites in places middle-class families never will. He writes, prayed at distance, pest house porch on Wednesday evening, and turned back for fear of contagion on Friday night. He does not write a name. The chaplain later pens a letter to the board. Please allow a prayer before removal. The board secretary files it under correspondence, not urgent, and writes, refer to statute, outside coroner jurisdiction, avoids public alarm. The mainland coroner's journal explains why the word dead never crosses on paper. The coroner's margin note near a quarantine complaint reads, Isle outside jurisdiction, body not brought ashore, no inquest. He underlines, no inquest, because no inquest stops reporters and starves rumors. If a body never rides the city ferry, the coroner never writes a line. If the coroner never writes a line, the parish register never sees a name. The sexton still rings in the morning because the chapel's bell sells a death toll like a ferry sells a night run, by count, not by caption. Look closely at the removed times and the ferry night book. When removed appears at 11:40 p.m., the hospital ferry night sheet shows 1 run at 11:50 p.m., extra coal, porter overtime, and canvas returned torn, noted as tilt repair. The torn repeats on both nights with removed. The dock's hedge snags canvas. The steward writes nothing about a hedge. The ferry writes tilt repair because canvas is a line item and the dead are not. Now find the euphemism stack in 2 inches of paper. Detained hides admitted to the pest house. Removed hides taken under canvas to the northeast grounds. Discharged hides walked or shipped back to steamer. Held hides yellow flag up, board physician in charge. No public alarm hides night order, ferry after 11. Outside jurisdiction hides no coroner, no inquest, no line in the parish book. A book that never prints died can still prove death if you can read the substitutions. The pest house nurse uses more lime and burns more linen. The steward pencils letters for wards, not names for graves. The ferry burns coal after dusk. The translator's notebook keeps the last soft consonant of a surname no one will spell again. The bell on shore adds 2 tolls the register does not own. The ledger does not lie. It refuses to speak the word and uses removed instead. Open the purchasing ledger for the quarantine month. The Board of Health buys like a machine, coal by the ton, carbolic by the pound, chloride of lime by the barrel, coffins by the dozen, ice by the block. The very week the newspaper prints "No cholera in port," the island storekeeper signs off on 2 extra tons of coal, 4 pounds of carbolic acid, 2 barrels of chloride of lime, 300 pounds of ice, and a rush order for 6 plain pine coffins marked to island. The clerk writes routine, but the numbers do not know that word. Coal first, because coal tells distance. A city loop to the ferry pier burns about 1/4 of a ton for 3-night runs. A round trip to the island and back against the tide burns about 3/4 of a ton. The overtime sheet shows 4 hospital ferry runs, and the coal bin drops 2 tons in 2 nights. 3/4 plus 3/4 equals 1.5. Add a half-ton margin for boil and idle, and the math lands on the mark. Coal entries are arithmetic, not rumor. Carbolic and lime next, because disinfectant does not lie. Chloride of lime comes in casks of 100 pounds. 1 cask dusts the pest house floor for a week when admissions are light. 2 casks issued in 2 nights means heavy use. The nurse's requisition tallies floor scrubbed twice, linen burned, canvas soiled. The carbolic line climbs from 1 pound per week to 4 pounds on the same 2 nights. Carbolic crystals make a 5% wash to coat tables, stretchers, and hands. 4 pounds gives roughly 9 gallons of strong solution. That is far more than a quiet week needs, and exactly what a post-mortem cleanup requires. The Icehouse Ledger writes the one phrase you cannot explain away. Hospital ferry, 300 pounds, loaded after 11. Butcher ice goes out at dawn. Pest house ice rides at night, because heat and rumor are both enemies. The porter initials the load and writes "drain to alley" in the morning. The janitor's daybook adds "sawdust 3 sacks" the same day. Sawdust is for blood and carbolic on planks. Coffins travel differently when an island is involved. The undertaker's supplier ships a dozen plain pines to the city each month. In the quarantine fortnight, a side invoice appears. 6 box pine, destination, island, ferry bill attached. The ferry company pins 2 night tickets to the crate slip, stamped paid by the Board of Health. The parish burial register still lists 9 interments, not 15. 6 extra boxes do not match 9 names. They match the extra ferry coal and the lime casks. Check consumables that never make headlines. Wicking, 1 coil, and lamp chimneys 2 issued to the pest house. Those nights tell you lamps burned late in rooms that should sleep. Glycerin, 1 pint, and zinc chloride, 2 pounds, leave the anatomy supply closet across town and reappear on a provisioner's invoice as instruction aids, delivered rear. The dean's petty cash records Anonymous gift, $15 on Monday, the same cash line the anatomy clerk uses for cadaver, unclaimed, 15. Island deaths feed the dissection room schedule without ever printing the word died. Follow the lime to ground. The island caretaker's tool and soil book shows spade edges dressed 2, wheelbarrow pin replaced, lime spread, northeast corner. He never writes grave. He writes corner and spread. The hedge by the back path picks up a new white crust at waist height where a tarpaulin brushes chalk. The hedge does not file minutes. It keeps residue. Add the ferry payroll to the disinfectant curve. The nights with porter overtime for stretcher duty are the nights with coal drop, ice load, lime doubled, and carbolic quadrupled. The harbor master logs held, no public alarm on the same dates, a formula that always pairs with yellow flag up and lanterns down. The coroner's book stays blank because outside jurisdiction lives on the waterline. Run one clean equation because bodies become math when paper refuses language. Coal plus ice plus lime plus carbolic plus coffins to island minus parish burials equals island dead off the ledger. For these 2 weeks, 2 tons of coal, 600 pounds of ice, 2 casks of lime, 8 pounds of carbolic, 6 coffins to the island, and only 9 names in the parish book. That yields 2 nights of removals and at least 3 island interments that never reach the parish lines. The board minutes say, city safe. The supplier ledger says chloride, 2 casks. The ferry says 4-night runs, hospital. The undertaker says to island. The bell on shore still tolls 11 across 9 lines of ink because coal and lime do not debate language. They count. Open the night orders book at the Board of Health. Thin onion skin copies, carbon smudges on the edges. The header reads, Special Movements. Most lines authorize daylight errands. A few lines are different. They name the hospital ferry by boat and captain, set the hour after dusk, and add a short phrase in the margin, avoid alarm. The orders carry the board physician's signature, but the ink and the stroke vary. On ordinary days, his hand is broad and slow. On the after-dusk orders, the loops are tight, and the cross on the letter T is short, the way a pen moves when the writer stands at a railing in the wind. Turn to the captain's log for the same dates. He writes in block letters, neat as a ledger. Cast off 11:40, no deck lamps, bow light hooded, 1 porter aboard, cargo, ice. Note, stretcher returned. He never writes patient. He writes stretcher as if it were a crate. He notes tide and wind. He underlines swell once. Underline means rough water and slow time, a longer burn of coal for the same mile. Check the police harbor beat book. A constable writes patrolled Pier 3 to Pier 5 and adds nothing more on quiet hours. On the nights that match the board orders, 2 entries change tone. Observed hospital ferry takes slip at 11:55. Deck dark. No noise. Porter carried canvas. Farther down the page he notes 2 men in white sleeves on island landing. The constable does not cross the water. He initials the line and adds, outside city limits. The phrase is not law, it is habit. It keeps a patrolman on his side of the tide. Open the coroner's daybook to the same fortnight. He writes 9 examinations ashore, each with a cause where he can guess and no inquest when the family agrees. On 2 nights, he adds a complaint line from a dock laborer. Man died on island, no summons. The coroner writes the same answer both times. Jurisdiction, limited to bodies brought ashore. He files the complaint under miscellaneous. He does not phone the board. He does not ride the ferry. The door in his mind is the water itself. Go back to the ferry office and ask for the porter's pocketbook. He keeps it folded in half, tied with string, stained with carbolic. In the same 2 nights he notes ice in at 11 and tilt returned torn. He writes stretcher out as a single word. He adds hands rinsed, carbolic at pump. He puts a small cross next to the hour on both lines. When asked what the cross means, he shrugs. In the city store ledgers, a cross means, "Do not chase a widow for payment." In a porter's hand, it means the kind of work no one puts on a bill. Walk the ferry path on the island side. From the landing to the pest house door, the plank walk shows a white dust that is not sand. Rub it. It tastes chalky. Chloride of lime rides the soles off the pest house porch. 10 paces beyond, the path forks. One branch climbs to the dormitory. The other turns behind the hedge toward a field with no sign. The field smells of salt and wet clay. The hedge at elbow height carries a smear where canvas brushed chalk into branch. The smear is the same height a man carries a stretcher when he is tired, and a wheel rut would betray him. Open the board physician's desk for the form letter he keeps ready. "Sir, your complaint is answered thus. The island falls under the board's exclusive direction. Removal of patients may occur to prevent public alarm and to maintain sanitary order. The coroner's office is notified only when a body is landed." The letter is polite. It says the quiet thing in official words. If a body stays on the island, the city is clean on paper. Now compare signatures, because signatures do not lie when men are rushed. The board physician signs morning orders with a flourish and the long tail of his surname. On night orders, the flourish dies after 2 letters. The tail shrinks to a dot. The same dot appears in the island steward's margin on lines that read, "Removed at midnight." The captain writes his block letters with a tiny nick on the downstroke of the letter M. The same nick appears on the ferry fuel chits. For nights he takes extra coal. The accounting office rubber stamp says, "Routine." The pen marks say otherwise. Find the clerk who writes the harbor movement board. He draws a small square beside held when the yellow flag is up. On the 2 nights of interest, he adds an extra tick to the square, a habit he learned at sea to mean passengers kept aboard. Boats move only by order. He does not erase the tick later when the paper goes to the newspaper office. The newspaper copies the word held and ignores the tick. The tick matters anyway because it pairs with the board order time, the captain's cast-off, and the porter's cross. Read the city watchman's notebook at the quarantine wharf. He logs "lamp lit for visitors" at the dead house door at dusk and "lamp snuffed" at 9. On both nights with hospital ferry runs, he writes "lamp relit" at 11:45. He notes "doctor on porch" and "nurse with pail." He adds "no speech." Silence is part of the method. Voices carry farther than wheels on damp boards. Open the island tool chest list. 2 spades, 1 mattock, 1 barrow, 1 canvas tilt, patched. The patched tilt appears after the 2 nights in question. The patch is dull, darker than the old canvas. On a bright morning it would show on the ferry like a flag. At midnight in a drizzle it looks like shadow. The island caretaker signs the tool list with a thumbprint in chalk. The thumbprint leaves a white circle on the page. The circle flakes when you touch it. Lime does not need a pen to confess. Pull the board payroll for those weeks. The line for the ferry captain shows overtime only on days with night orders. The line for the porter shows stretcher duty twice and tilt repair twice. The line for the island nurse shows floor scrubbed twice and linen burned. The line for the chaplain shows nothing. He wrote in his call book, "Prayed at distance." The board does not pay for distance. Match the orders, the logs, the beats, and the books in one row, the way you would lay tools on a bench. Board order after dusk. Captain cast off without deck lamps. Police notation, outside limits. Coroner note, no summons. Porter cross at the hour, white chalk on hedge, steward margin mark, fuel chit with the captain's nick on the letter M, watchman lamp relit. Tool list with patched canvas, payroll with stretcher duty. None of these items says the word death. All of them describe the path a body takes when paper chooses water over ink. Now open the last page of the night orders book. The board physician wrote a sentence after a long meeting. Public alarm is a greater danger than isolated removals. He underlined danger, not removals. The ferry captain closed his log that night with sea-like glass. The porter washed his hands in carbolic and tied his pocketbook with string. The bell on shore did its job in the morning. It counted. The water did its job at midnight. It erased. Begin with the pest house fire sheet. Origin, stove in Ward A. Damage, roof and papers. The captain's margin says what the typed line will not. No smoke in flue for a week. Strong odor of paraffin. Drawer warped. Lock failed. Contents consumed. The drawer was labeled unclaimed and island burials. The watchman logs a man in shirt sleeves leaving the rear door at 9. He writes, no cap, smell of camphor, hands white with chalk. The nurse's nightbook lists lamp relit 11:40, floor scrubbed, linen burned. She does not write fire. She writes smoke seen on roof ridge, and then buckets passed. Open the insurance claim. The board files for stove accident and lists 2 windows, 1 door, 1 shelving. The total is low enough to pass without an adjuster on the island. Attached is a rush bill for an iron safe, delivered next morning and installed by noon. The safe is paid the same day before the insurer even stamps the claim as received. The carpenter charges for a new hasp on the burned drawer and writes, drawer empty when arrived. He underlines empty. At the ferry office, the captain's log for that night reads, cast off 11:50, bow light hooded, cargo ice, tilt, returned torn. He adds, smoke over island on return. He does not file a distress note. The porter's pocketbook has a cross beside the hour and the line, carboy to island, empty, returned at dawn. He has used the word carboy all month for the glass acid jug. The ashman at the board office notes rag paper clinkers from the dean's grate the next afternoon. Linen paper makes that sound when it chars. The dean files a notice of loss for the anatomy accounts book. Cause mislaid during office removal. The college did not move offices that season. The newspaper runs 2 short items. One says, rumors of pest house blaze exaggerated. Fire contained. No loss of life. The other is a half column on the same page paid for by a trustee, a bright ad for night classes. In the press ledger, the trustee pays for the ad for 4 weeks. On the editor's expense sheet, the trustee buys him lunch the day the denial runs. The editor's wife gets a subscription to the Ladies' Aid the next week. The Ladies' Aid ledger records gift from friend and buys 2 coffee pots for students. The students do not live on the island. They live by the rear door of the college. Check the mortuary office across town. That night the morgue record reads lamp snuffed 9. Then lamp relit 11:45. Visitors. The visitors line explains why paraffin shows up in the fire captain's note. Candle drip on old plank makes a wick with lint and dust. A thumb rubbed with paraffin makes a match take in damp air. The next morning, the morgue files its own small fire claim for a clerk's stove scorch and orders a new iron chest. The adjuster stamps paid without a site visit. He has already stamped the island safe. Pull the board minutes for the week after. The secretary writes, no cholera in port, quarantine measures satisfactory, and pest house roof repaired. He adds, public alarm unfounded, and moves on. He does not minute a loss of books. The purchasing ledger tells it sideways. Tags, linen, 2 dozen, wire ties, 1 dozen, canvas tilt, 1 patched, chloride of lime, 1 barrel, saw horses, 2. Tags and wire are for wrists and ankles. Saw horses are for a table when a trestle burns. Lime comes after a pull. Find the lawyer's footprint because lawyers show when clergymen cannot. In the undertaker's cash book, 3 lines appear in 5 days. Retainer S&S, consultation RM, settlement island matter. In the S&S docket, a clerk writes, "Advised private relief, negotiated withdrawal." The parish file holds a widow's letter, "My brother was removed without my leave." The church treasurer pays her benevolence the same day the undertaker pays settlement. The gravedigger's sheet shows night overtime 2 hours, the only night overtime in the quarter. The sexton's bell book stays blank. He is paid by the pull. He did not pull. Open the fire captain's second visit note. He writes, "Self-closing door fitted, iron safe installed, candle use prohibited." A month later, he signs off, "Compliant." The quarantine watchman's book still logs, "Lamp lit for visitors at door after dusk." A candle for visitors is the oldest way to restart a fire without the word arson anywhere. Next to "lamp lit," he adds, "doctor on porch, nurse with pail, no speech." Audit the donors because money speaks in neat lines. The Medical College Alumni Ledger receives $100 for instruction aids, $45 for equipment, $15 for specimens. That is 7 bodies at $15 and change for ice and carbolic. The hospital receives a $30 gift to the Indigent Burial Fund. The almshouse buys new sheet for dead house. The board buys iron safe pest house. In the same week, the anatomy clerk drops the word cadaver and writes specimen. The porter stops carboy out and writes glass returned. The janitor stops lie for floor and writes soap strong. Pull the pest house tool list the week after the fire. It adds spade edges dressed, wheelbarrow pin replaced, and ash pit cleared. The island caretaker signs the list with a thumbprint in white chalk again. He leaves a ring on the paper that flakes when you touch it. Chalk tells on everything. It sits in hedge bark at elbow height. It sits in plank seams as dust. It sits in the lines of a thumb until a man scrubs with carbolic. Now lay the ash and the ads on one page. Captain Margin, paraffin. Watchman, shirt sleeves, camphor on hands. Insurance paid before an adjuster rides the ferry. Iron safes bought in a hurry. Missing ledgers replaced by notices of loss about rooms that never moved. Denial column opposite a trustee ad. Coffee pots for students when the island burned books. Retainer, consult, settlement. Night overtime without a bell. Linen tags ordered and wire ties issued when death never appears as a word. One sentence sits in a board letter that sums the method. Public tranquility must be maintained at any cost. The cost in that week looks like a roof shingle and a drawer of ash. It sounds like a bell that does not toll. It reads like a ledger that switches one noun for another and a clerk who underlines empty. Open the steamer manifest the day she tied up to the quarantine flag. Cabin, steerage, sick list, nationality. 5 names on the sick list, 3 scripts on one page, a Polish hand, a Cyrillic hand, a German hand. The boarding surgeon circles fever beside 2 men and rash beside a young woman. He writes to island on 3 lines and notes examined for the others. He adds no bed numbers and no wards. He stamps held. Pull the dock intake cards the immigration clerk copied in the shed. Each card has boxes for name, age, origin, occupation, and remark. The clerk writes Joseph with an accent, then crosses it out and prints Josef in block letters. For the second man, he guesses Henrik, then scribbles Henrik in the margin. For the woman, he writes Maria, then overwrites Mary to make it simple for later officers. In the remark box, he copies the boarding surgeon's word detained and adds ferry in pencil. Walk to the translator's pocket notebook. He works for cash by the week when steamers bring mixed tongues. He writes sounds, not letters. He lists endings he hears on deck, ski, wits, ik. He adds stress marks so a name can be found again later. He puts 2 options under Josef. He puts 3 under Henrik. He leaves the surname line with a question mark, because the steamer clerk wrote it in a storm, and a wave broke the ink. On the last page of the notebook, he draws a small map of the island with letters for wards, A, C, D. He will carry the notebook to the pest house and try one more time to catch the right vowels through a fever. Open the quarantine station register for that afternoon. 3 cards arrive with the same hour stamped. The steward copies the names as he hears them and writes detained for all 3. He adds A beside the first man for cholera shed, C beside the second for contagion, and D beside the woman for dormitory. He cannot hold the accents on his pen. He does not try. He adds occupations by guess. Laborer, laborer, seamstress. Under disposition he leaves a blank. He will write removed or discharged when the order comes. Turn the pest house log. The nurse records numbers, not names. She writes number. 214 man, fever. Number. 215 man, fever. Number. 216 woman, rash. Under status, she writes no change for the 2 men at dusk. She writes improved for the woman on the second morning. She enters supplies beside the lines as she takes them. 1 scoop of lime for A, 1 scoop for C, none for D. Late that night she adds carbolic wash made fresh and canvas soiled for Ward A. She writes removed at 11:40 next to number 214. She writes removed at midnight next to number 215. She draws thin lines through both rows and closes the book. At the island office, the steward files 2 carbon copies of a single instruction. By order of board physician, remove patients from observation to grounds northeast after the last ferry. He initials the carbons and pins them under a thumbtack. He goes back to the register and writes removed under disposition for both men. He writes discharged to steamer for the woman at dawn after the boarding surgeon clears her. He does not return to add surnames. Cross to the immigration inspector's ledger ashore. He notes 3 detained from this steamer and 2 returned. He writes 1 line for each with a surname as the ship clerk printed it. For the 3rd line, he writes unknown and leaves a blank. He stamps admitted beside the woman's card after she reaches the pier. He stamps not admitted beside the blank line and adds referred to board. He does not cross the water to see what referred means on the island. Check the steamer's own sick list in the purser's book. He wrote Joseph as Joseph without an accent. He wrote Henrik as Henrik. He wrote Maria as Mariah. He writes sent to island on all 3 lines at noon. He writes return to steamer on 1 line at dawn 2 days later. He writes no return on the other 2. He will settle his accounts for those passengers as unlanded. Open the chaplain's letter file. 1 envelope holds a note in a stiff hand from a woman who arrived on the same steamer. She writes in Polish and signs with a cross. A translator has penciled English under the lines. She asks if Joseph, son of Piotr, reached the city. She says he wore a cap with a red band and a wool coat. The chaplain writes back in plain English with 1 sentence, "Your companion was detained by the board for observation." He does not write a 2nd sentence. He files the letter and notes prayed at distance on the day the nurse wrote removed. Walk the island ground northeast of the pest house porch. The caretaker's tool book for that week lists spade edges dressed and lime spread northeast corner. He never writes grave, he writes corner. The hedge that borders the corner shows a white crust at the height of a stretcher. The path carries a wheel rut where a barrow turned. There are no markers, only a row of stones flush with the grass. The steward keeps a yard map with small squares for early years. He stopped drawing squares when the board decided the island ground was temporary. The squares never got names. Open the harbor master's incident page for that ship. He writes cholera denied after inspection and notes some detained to island. He adds no alarm to the public and stamps safe. He does not list account for island grounds. He writes cleared to sail for the steamer the next day. Now lay the 3 men and women in a single row, the way the paper tries not to. Ship list says 5 sick. Island admits 3. Pest house logs 3 numbers. Disposition reads removed for 2 and discharged for 1. Immigration ledger shows 2 returned and 1 blank. Purser writes no return for 2. Chaplain records prayed at distance on the first night. Caretaker spreads lime northeast corner on the second. The parish on shore buries 9 and tolls 11. 2 tolls belong to men who crossed a mile of water with names in 3 alphabets and left the island under a word that never says dead. Town 1 is a river port. The sexton's bell book is perfect. He writes hour, weather, and strokes. In June he rings 11 times across 2 weeks. The parish burial register lists 9 pauper burials, with plot numbers along the mainland fence. The ferry company night sheet shows 4 hospital runs after dusk, with extra coal loaded. The harbor master writes held, and adds a small tick he uses to mean passengers kept aboard. The quarantine steward writes removed at midnight for 2 numbers in the pest house book, and signs 2 orders to avoid alarm. The undertaker's supplier bills 6 plain pine coffins to the island with 2 night tickets pinned to the crate. The island tool list adds spade edges dressed and lime spread northeast corner. The parish never writes those 2 names. The total in this town is 11 bells, 11 holes, 9 names. Town 2 is a lake port. The hospital board prints 0 unclaimed on its quarterly report. The newspaper runs the number on page 1 with a cheerful line about good health. The same quarter, the medical college receiving book logs 3 lines that read, Cadaver unclaimed cash 15. The ice house ledger shows 3 deliveries of 300 pounds each to the college rear door after 11 at night. The Porter's Day book adds ice in and glass returned on those dates with his looped initial. The anatomy store's book issues linen tags, wire ties, carbolic soap, and lamp chimneys late on the same nights. The janitor orders sawdust and writes floor scrub twice. Across town, the almshouse steward marks delivered in the disposition column and leaves notified without proof of any posted notice. The chaplain's call book for those weeks has 2 notes that read, turned back for fear of contagion. The coroner writes no inquest for 1 unknown male and underlines outside jurisdiction. The hospital still prints 0 unclaimed. The college still counts 3 bodies by ice and cash. The total in this town is newspaper 0, college 3, parish silent. Town 3 is an Atlantic station with a statute that uses a wider clock. The county code allows removal after 72 hours, not counting Sundays or holidays. The dead house card on the wall says public hours 10 to 2 on weekdays, by appointment on Saturday, closed Sunday. A death at 6 on Friday becomes legal to move at 3 on Tuesday. Working relatives cannot claim on Sunday and cannot reach the island by noon on Monday. The almshouse steward marks delivered at 3:10 on Tuesday. The college clerk writes cadaver unclaimed at 3:30. The harbor police add a note that reads outside limits. The ferry captain logs cast off at 3:40 with cargo ice and stretcher returned. The pest house ledger for the same week shows no word died. It shows removed at night and linen burned. The undertaker's book shows no pencil dashes. There are no night wagons on the city side because the door is water, not road. The cemetery on shore has no light mounds by a back gate. The island hedge still shows a chalk smear at elbow height. The total in this town is legal on paper, quick in practice, and missing from the parish lines. Put the 3 totals on one line the way auditors do. Riverport, 11 bells, 9 burials, 2 removed off ledger, Lakeport, Hospital 0, College 3, Ice 3, Parish silent. Atlantic Station, statute window wide. Removals on Tuesday afternoon, no city inquest, no parish entry. The words change by harbor. The method does not. The bell counts rise. The ferry coal drops. The steward writes, removed. The college buys ice at night. The parish keeps its column clean. Start with the 2 pages almost every town still keeps. Photograph the sexton's bell log for any week that shows pauper burials in the parish register. Count strokes per day. If the bell total is higher than the names in the register, write the gap in the margin. Bells minus names equals. Note, weather, and hour. Morning tolls paired with no procession in the sexton's notes point to quiet interments or island removals. Pull the ferry night sheet. Ask for coal and overtime, not just the trip list. Copy every line that says Hospital Ferry, the cast-off time, and how much coal loaded after dusk. A short city loop burns little coal. An island loop against tide burns much more and returns with stretcher returned or canvas returned torn. The porter's initials beside ice in after 11 complete the picture. Open the Board of Health minute book and the separate special movements orders. Photograph any line that sets a ferry after dusk with the margin phrase, avoid alarm. On the purchasing pages, circle the same week issues of chloride of lime, carbolic acid, ice by the block, canvas tilt, and tags. If the minutes say no cases, while the purchasing page says 2 barrels of lime, you have the paper speaking in 2 voices. Check the quarantine station books. In the station register, copy every row where disposition reads removed at night. In the pest house log, copy supply lines that match those removals. Floor scrubbed twice, linen burned, canvas soiled. Photograph the steward's margin mark, if he uses one when a board physician signs the order. The word died may never appear. The supply trail will. Ask the harbor master for the held page the week your numbers spike. Copy the hour the yellow flag went up, the notes some detained, and any private ticks the clerk uses to mark passengers kept aboard. Held plus hospital ferry after dusk plus porter. Overtime is a route, not a rumor. At the undertaker's, lay the receipt book beside the ledger. Look for missing numbers in the receipt sequence, pencil dashes where names should be, and side invoices that read Box Pine to Island with ferry tickets pinned. In the supplier's ledger, copy canvas tilt patched and dates it return torn. A head shows on canvas before a headline shows in a paper. If the town has a medical college, request 4 books, receiving and expenditure, porter's day book, the store's book, and the janitor's waste schedule. Photograph any line that reads cadaver unclaimed cash 15, then the same day, ice in, glass returned, linen tags, wire ties, carbolic soap, sawdust, 3 sacks. If the wording shifts from cadaver to specimen right after a scandal or a fire, note the date. In the almshouse or hospital steward's book, copy the death time and the disposition word. If the column reads delivered 2 days after a Friday evening death and the dead house public hours are limited to weekdays, underline the clock game. Sabbaths and holidays pause the count in many codes and create a legal window the living cannot meet. Walk the ground. On the island path from the landing to the northeast corner, look for a white crust at elbow height on the hedge, wheel ruts that turn toward grass, and spade edges dressed in the tool list. The caretaker will write lime spread northeast corner. He will not write grave. Turn to the newspaper only after the paper trail is solid. Clip lines that say no unclaimed, no alarm, safe, and place them beside a trustee's paid advertisement on the same page. The denial and the ad often travel together. Write your town's proof as one row anyone can repeat. Bells higher than names. Hospital ferry after dusk with extra coal. Board order, avoid alarm. Station register, removed at midnight. Pest house supplies doubled. Ice in after 11. Undertaker receipt gaps. And to island crates. Lime to the northeast corner. College cadaver unclaimed with porter overtime. Parish still at 9. If you can check only one source this week, Start with the sexton's bell log and the ferry night sheet for the same days. If you can add one more, take the quarantine station register and photograph the word "removed" with the time. If you have access to a college, capture a single cadaver unclaimed cash 15 line and the ICE delivery that sits beside it. Your turn to move this case forward. Comment your city and the nearest river or harbor and name the 2 records you can reach first this week: bell log, ferry night sheet, quarantine register, board orders, undertaker receipts, or college receiving book. If you want the follow-up where we audit a named island with a map you can test, hit subscribe and tap the bell. Every new subscriber turns one quiet "removed at midnight" into a document we can put back on the map.